Hello, I'm Alex Crook, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent. You are watching the talkSPORT YouTube channel, where we're rounding up all the big headlines from Friday and looking ahead to a gigantic weekend in the Premier League. So let's start with Thursday night's Champions League action. A victory for Manchester City at home to Kevin De Bruyne's Napoli. De Bruyne's homecoming ruined by a sending off. He was sacrificed midway through the first half. Erling Haaland on the score sheet yet again as Pep Guardiola's side warmed up for their huge clash at Arsenal on Sunday, with all 3 points in their European opener. An altogether more disappointing story for Newcastle. Despite dominating the first half at home to Barcelona, Eddie Howe's side went down by 2 Marcus Rashford goals to 1. Rashford marking his return to England in the grand manner. A heady goal to put Barcelona in front, and then a simply sensational long-range effort to ultimately seal the win for Barcelona. Afterwards, Rashford said he is highly motivated and wants to stay at Barcelona for as long as possible. I'm not sure how those comments will be received by fans of Manchester United. Rashford, it's worth remembering, only on loan at Barca, albeit with an option to make that move permanent at the end of the season. I think, in fairness, the jury in Spain was out until this point as to whether Rashford would be a success in a Barca shirt, but he is capable of those kind of magical performances that we saw at St James's Park. The question is, can he sustain that on a long-term basis? And with doubts over the future of Ruben Amorim, the Manchester United manager, it isn't beyond the realms of fantasy that Rashford could yet return to Old Trafford. Of course, he came through the fabled United Youth Academy before falling out with Amorim. He spent last season on loan at Aston Villa. They ultimately opted not to make the signing permanent, and his wages could still be an issue for Barcelona come the end of the season, so certainly one to watch. And there'll be other suitors in the Premier League and across Europe if he can keep performing like he did up in the northeast. Thomas Tuchel, watching from the stands at St James's Park, it's pretty clear that he fancies Rashford ahead of the World Cup in America next summer. And I think unless his form dramatically towers away or he suffers from injury, Rashford is virtually guaranteed to be on the plane, and who knows, could even be a starter on that left-hand side when England begin their quest for a first trophy since 1966. We'll talk about Amorim later, but let's focus on another manager under pressure. And West Ham's Graham Potter is firmly under the cosh heading into Saturday's London derby at home to Crystal Palace. It's just 6 wins in 24 games in all competitions for Potter since he replaced Julian Lopetegui midway through last season. Only Avram Grant has a lower win percentage as a West Ham gaffer in the Premier League era, and it feels like Potter needs a positive result, with fans expected to protest outside the London Stadium before the game. I broke the news on Thursday that Slaven Bilic, a former West Ham manager, is a strong candidate to return should Potter lose his job. After this game against Palace, the Hammers travel to Everton on Monday week. That'll be live on talkSPORT, and there would be an irony, wouldn't there, if it was David Moyes who ended Potter's reign in charge. Bilic, I'm told, would be keen to come back. I think that's an appointment that would divide West Ham fans. He finished 7th in his first season in the dugout. They set a record Premier League points tally, 11th in his second season, and then it very quickly unravelled before he was fired, ironically to be replaced by Moyes in the third season. But he is still revered by West Ham fans. A bit of a cult hero in many ways, not just for what he did in the dugout, but for his time on the pitch as well. The other name in the frame is Nuno Espirito Santo, and actually it's been suggested to me that Karen Brady, another member of the West Ham hierarchy, has held talks with Nuno this week. So clearly West Ham are coming up with a succession plan in case Potter cannot turn things around. Another manager who hasn't made the best of starts to the season is Unai Emery at Aston Villa. They have a massive game away from home against Sunderland this weekend, looking not just for their first Premier League win of the season, but their first Premier League goal as well. It's a far cry from last season when they only missed out on a Champions League place on the very last day, losing at Manchester United. I'm told by high-ranking sources at Villa there is no pressure on Emery in terms of his job. He's got enough credit in the bank with the powers that be there they're backing him to come through this mini slump at the start of the season. I think also they appreciate that because of PSR, it's not been an easy summer transfer window. They had to sell Jacob Ramsey to Newcastle, did a lot of business late in the day. They signed 3 players on deadline day. Jadon Sancho on loan from Manchester United, who actually performed pretty well in the League Cup penalty shootout defeat against Brentford in midweek. Victor Lindelof, another ex-Manchester United player, arrived on a free transfer, and they snapped up Harvey Elliott, who scored in that game against Brentford. He's on loan initially with an obligation to buy. What about Ruben Amorim then? There's been a lot of focus on his job in the wake of that 3-0 Manchester derby hammering at the hands of City. United officially have made their worst start to a season since 1992, the very first year of the Premier League, when of course they signed Eric Cantona from Leeds, went on to win the Premier League. I don't think even the most optimistic United fan thinks that will happen this time around. They've got Chelsea this weekend, a fixture they don't normally lose. It's a long time since Chelsea won at Old Trafford. In fact, this is the most drawn fixture in Premier League history. He's had a full week to prepare, Amorim, whereas Chelsea have had an arduous trip to Bayern Munich in the Champions League, ultimately losing to a Harry Kane double in that game. It feels like this is a big one for Ruben Amorim. So Jim Ratcliffe will be in attendance, while we're being told that the Manchester United hierarchy will continue to back their manager. He surely has to start delivering results soon. There have been names circulated this week of potential successors for Amorim. Gareth Southgate amongst them. That would be ironic, because one of the reasons that Dan Ashworth, the former technical director there, left his post was because he was advocating for Southgate, Graham Potter and Thomas Frank when United decided to appoint Amorim instead. So let's quickly wish you through the big games this weekend. We start with a Merseyside derby live on talkSPORT. Liverpool against Everton, the Premier League champions, the only team protecting a 100% record, but they've ridden their luck at times with some late winners. They did it again in the Champions League against Atletico Madrid in midweek. 2-0 up and cruising. The visitors got it back to 2-2. And it was a Virgil van Dijk stoppage time header that ultimately won the day for Liverpool. Everton have a wretched record in this fixture. So does David Moyes. This will be his 21st visit to Anfield as a manager. Would you believe he has never won? He might just feel Liverpool could be there for the taking, given their defensive issues. Will Alexander Isak start? Probably not. He started against Atletico in midweek, but I would expect that Hugo Ekitike comes back in for this game. And in Jack Grealish, Everton do have a player who started the season in sensational form, and he will feel he can take advantage of those deficiencies at the back. Either way, it should be an absolutely fantastic game. Elsewhere this weekend, I've mentioned it already, we've got Manchester United against Chelsea. That's the 5:30 kickoff on Saturday. On Sunday, I'm going to be at the big game of the weekend, Arsenal against Manchester City. City reigniting their season after a disappointing start with that win in the Manchester derby, but I think this is going to be much more of an acid test than that game, and the victory over 10-man Napoli in midweek. Historically, Mikel Arteta has struggled against Pep Guardiola, but the apprentice has turned the tables on the master in recent seasons. Arteta has won 2 of his last 4 meetings with Guardiola. They're looking for a 3rd successive home victory in the Premier League over City. And I think after being criticised for a negative performance away from home against Liverpool, the Arsenal manager is going to want to send out some kind of a statement. What does it mean for City if they lose this game? Well, they'll be 6 points behind Arsenal. They could be, if Liverpool win the Merseyside derby, 9 points off top spot. Even at this early stage of the season, if Liverpool win and City lose, I think it would take a Herculean effort to wrestle the title back from the Merseysiders. So there you have it, all the talking points ahead of another huge weekend in the Premier League. Follow it all on talkSPORT, and we'll be back on Monday rounding up more of the big talking points.